on both. All right. This is Maria Schumacher. I'm speaking with Thomas Haverland. Hi.
Correct.
Thank you for speaking with me today. So can you tell me a little bit about when you moved to Greenhills? You were about 10 years old, right?
No, I was 15 or 16, I
Oh, you
think.
were. Oh, okay.
Because I'd gone to 1 year of freshman in Rebekah High School.
Mhm.
So I had to be, 16 or 17? 15, I guess, then.
Okay, so you moved.
And when we moved to Greenhills, I was a sophomore.
Okay, so you
And
did move in 1938.
Yeah, so I graduated in 46, and I turned 18 that year, I think. Anyhow, my parents we lived in Wyoming, Ohio. My dad was a caretaker on the estate down there, and basically his job was taking care of that whole 12-acre estate and the mansion and being a chauffeur for the Little family. So that was during the end of the Great Depression.
Yeah.
And we were considered poor people then because my dad only made $30 a month. And that included our 4-room cottage with 2 bedrooms, a living room and a kitchen, no bathroom, outside John and cistern water. Then, and I won't go into the details of that, but we were, my parents, we went to school and at St. James in Wyoming. And in 1942, when Franklin Delano Roosevelt created the Greenbelt communities, my dad got wind of this through politics. He was a staunch Democrat. So he applied for and got a job on the landscape department for the government village of Greenhills. So in 1942, we borrowed my cousin Otto's Model T truck, put everything we owned on it, and moved to Greenhills. And there's a story in there that describes that trip. But we moved to 25 Chalmers Lane, and it was an apartment. It had 2 bedrooms, a full bath, and then it had a kitchen, utility room, and a living room. And we thought we had died and gone to heaven with that bathroom because we had an outside John in Wyoming.
So that was a big change for you.
And then, in those days, your rent was based on your salary. So I don't know what Dad paid for that apartment, a 2-bedroom apartment. But right across the street at 30 Chalmers, there was 6 people in our family. 3, my brother Austin, my brother Bill, my sister Margaret were all in the Second World War. So Dad knew. My mother died in 1945 when I was 17. And she died of cerebral hemorrhage. That's what we lived at 30 Chalmers Lane then. But the reason they got the 3-bedroom apartment across the street was because of all the family members that Dad thought eventually would come home. So we lived there for quite a while, and then they formed the Greenhills Home Ownership Corporation in 1950, and all the people that rented the apartments had a chance to buy their apartments. Well, Dad didn't want to buy it. He didn't want to go into debt. So my brother Bill and I took Dad over to Century Inn. I don't know if you know where that is. It's in Glendale.
Okay.
And we got him all snookered up. and we convinced him that when my sister Margaret came home, she would have to have a permanent home. And it only cost $4,000 for that one unit in 1950. There were 4 units in the apartment building. And then one of the other gentlemen that had bought it, one of the apartments left, and Dad bought him out for I think $5,000. So he got 3-bedroom apartments for $9,000. Then the other neighbor had the other 2 apartments. So in when my dad and my sister bought a house over on Hadley Avenue in Greenhills, they sold their 2 apartments to the other owner of the other 2 apartments for $52,000. So it went from $8,000 to $52,000.
That's
in about about 15 years, or 20 years. So that's where my dad and my sister never married. But she was a second lieutenant Army nurse. And then my brother Austin was enlisted in the Air Force in 1939 because my dad said that this Hitler guy was going to start a war. So he wanted Austin to join the same service he did in the First World War, which was the U.S. Army Air Corps now. That was they changed the name later to the Air Force. So in those days, if you enlisted in the Air Force, you could choose wherever you wanted to be stationed. So Austin was always interested in the Far East, and he didn't want to go to Guam, which was territory of the United States, but Hawaii was. So he chose to go to Hawaii. Well, that was in 1939. Of course, in 1941, they bombed Pearl Harbor. He got bombed. He got injured in the attack. The explosion split all his big toenails and blew him across the hangar. They were getting parts out for some of their planes that were damaged. And out of his crew of 9, I think 4 of them were killed. It's kind of tragic. But he served from 1939 to 1945. He came out as a master sergeant. My brother Bill, 1944, because my parents had kept him back in grade school because of his learning disability or something. He turned 18 when he was in junior in high school, so they drafted him, and he went in 1944. He was in the combat engineers. And my sister, who was a nurse, enlisted and became a second lieutenant. And by the way, my brother Bill stayed in the Air Force. Well, he was in the Army during the Second World War. Then he enlisted in the Air Force, and he retired from the Air Force. But he was also a master sergeant. My dad was in the First World War with the American Expeditionary Force, and he was assigned to SPAD fighter planes that the French built, but the American pilots flew. So he was over there for 2 years. And during that time, my mother somehow got his name, and they were pen pals, and when they came out, my dad came out, he met my mother downtown. The first thing they did, they went to Mass. And then from then on, he used to walk from Union Central over to Glendale to court my mother. And they got married in 1920. Then there was 4 of us born, and I was the baby of the family. I was born in 1920. So that's basically But the reason that we went to Greenhills is because of better living conditions and better pay for my dad. So he worked outdoors most all his life as a carpenter or a gardener. And my grandfather invented the Haverland strawberry, which I told you about that before. So our name in German, Haverland, means oat land. Our owner of a dweller on an oat farm. And we're from Hamburg, Germany, which is close to the Dutch border. And Haver in Dutch means oat. So that's how they got their name. So here I am. I don't know how many generations I am, but many of them.
Yeah.
And there's been 3 of our family that lost their life in different wars, cousins and so on. But my mother belonged to the Ladies Auxiliary of the Veterans of Foreign Wars. My dad was post commander of the Jack Malloy Post, BFW, in Greenhills. And, of course, they were very involved in that. And, of course, I went into service in the Korean War in 1950. That's another story.
Yeah. Wow. So you were only living in Greenhills for a fairly short period of time when you were in high school, correct? And then,
no,
but that you stayed there after high school.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
I joined the Tall Club in Cincinnati, which is a club for tall people. I'm 6'4", or I was at that time. And I went down to one of their weekend conventions, and this girl came. I went to sit in a hotel, what they called the Coal Hole. They had Dixieland music down in the basement. So my friend Leonard Havlis and I went to listen to this. And we came up the steps, and I met this girl I met at All Park, which was a place where they had dances in the summertime. And she was a real tall girl. So she belonged to the Tall Club, so she was there when I came up the steps. I said, "Hi, how you doing?" She says, "Oh, I'm here. We're having a Tall Club weekend party. Why don't you come on up and join?" So I joined that club. So I belonged to that club for about 2 years. And Sally, through roundabout reasons, came to Cincinnati, and I met her at a pig roast.
Wow.
And I fell in love with her right away. So anyhow, we got married at Our Lady of the Rosary Church in Greenhills in 1961, on February 11th. And the reason we married then was because in those days in the Catholic Church, you couldn't get married during Lent.
Mm.
So we were hot to trot. So we got married in February. And we spent our honeymoon in Dayton, Ohio. Boy, big deal.
Exciting.
Anyhow, we had four kids:
Mm.
Michael, Patrick, Timothy, and Catherine. And they're spread all over Michael and Patrick are up near Dayton. Mm. Timmy's in Maryland. And Catherine lives in Brighton, England with her husband. Which, and then, like I said, she teaches. And she takes tours, groups that come from university shows them how they run their early childhood development school there in England. So that's what she does.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that. Well, why don't you tell me how long did you live in Greenhills then?
Well, I lived in Greenhills. Let's see. We got married in '61. I think we lived in Greenhills until 1965. We had 2 boys in a 1-bedroom apartment at 72 Farragut Road. And Sally got pregnant with our 3rd boy. So it was just too tight. So I was eligible to get a home through the GI Bill rather than a term. So this house is what we bought. And we bought it, I think it was 1970 some odd, or maybe 60 some odd. We've been here 53 years. So you figure out, go back from the state and you figure out how many years that is. But that's where we lived. All those 4 kids, this is a 3-bedroom house. And I finished off the basement and made a bedroom down there for the boys. And a family room, you know. But I'm quite handy with tools and stuff like that. And I owe all that to my dad, who was a carpenter, and to Mr. Monaco, who was my industrial arts teacher at Greenhills High School. And in fact, one of the stories I gave you is about Mr. Monaco, how he was my favorite teacher because he not only gave me good grades, but he taught me a lot about things, you know.
Yeah.
I still have some of the furniture I made. And a couple of them I won first prize down at the Haverland County Fair. Those days he used to submit school projects, you know, for judging. So that's that.
So why don't you tell me more about high school, because that was when those were your youngest years when you were living in Greenhills. Just about some experiences.
One thing that was nice about living in Greenhills, we were about 2.5 blocks away from high school. So we could walk to high school, my brother Bill and I. And the teachers there were extraordinary. Miss McAfee was my homeroom teacher in my junior and senior years. She directed the choir, and I was a tenor. When I was a kid, I was a child soprano in the church choir at St. James Church in Wyoming. But anyhow, of course, my voice changed, and I sang tenor then. And I sang in boys' choir and mixed chorus. I was in one operetta, I think. But that's the only instrument I ever used as my voice. I used to be able to whistle pretty good, but now I've lost all my teeth. I can't whistle like I used to. But when I was a kid, my brother got to play the tuba. My sister got to play piano. My other brothers got to play trumpet. And then the Depression, and I came along, and Mom said, "Well, Tommy, we can't afford you any instrument. You got to use your voice. You have a beautiful voice." So I joined the church choir, and I think myself and one other guy. Eddie Fairbanks was the other voice soprano, and Mr. Weisbrot was our choir instructor. There's a lot of fond memories there, singing, you know.
Yeah.
And then, after I got out of high school, and I joined the tall club, a couple of those guys got together, We used to harmonize drinking beer one thing and another. He said, why don't we get a little group together? And Charlie Flynn was one of my good friends that I got into this all that I worked with. He played ukulele, and he was a baritone, and we got another guy, I can't think of his name. Anyhow, he sang bass. I sang tenor. And we formed what they call the High C Boys, High Cincinnati Tall Club. And
get it now.
and I was a silk screen printer at the time. So I bought some really neat caps, and I across the bill I would silk screen High C Boys. So we used to sing at all our little weekend parties and conventions, stuff like that, and we also sang at different, people would hire us to sing at different functions, you know. But Charlie Flynn is the only one left that's living. Jack Cade was the other guy that sang bass. But I have a pretty good memory, you know, which I thank God for. I can't get around much anymore, as the old sound goes, but I can still remember things, which, with a little prodding, sometimes I come up with pretty neat stories.
You have so far. In your, you told us a bit about your free time, especially with
Okay, well,
music.
high
What about,
school.
yeah, your friends, and what would you do for fun?
At the co-op drugstore had a soda fountain there. They called it an emporium. And of course all the girls that worked at the fountain were cheerleaders. And Alice Derry was one of them, God rest her soul. She went with my brothers Austin and Bill Booth, and she was a couple years ahead of me in high school. But she worked at the fountain, and one day I came in there and I got a cherry phosphate. And she always treated me with giving me a little extra phosphate, my cherry phosphate. But anyhow, one day she said, Tom, you know how to dance? And at the time I weighed about 300 pounds. And I had acne real bad, and the curse of teenagers. I said, no, Alice, I said, nobody's ever taught me. She said, well, why don't you come over to the house and I'll teach you how to jitterbug. So God bless her, I went over to her house on Burley Circle. And she put a record on and she said, now, first of all, now when you put your hand around a girl's waist, you never want to put your hand below her belt line.
Good advice.
Anyhow, I went over there and she just taught me the basic steps, you know. And then we started into waltzes. And we started into jitterbugging. And by the time she finished with me, I was one of the best dancers around. I could really cut a rug, as the saying goes. So anyhow, dear Alice, her husband, her first husband, Herman Mackey, lived in Glendale, Ohio, and lived close to where my aunt and uncle lived. And I think they had 5 boys in that family. But anyhow, she was quite a character. And when my mother died, Mrs. Derry, God rest her soul, took to washing and pressing my shirts and my other clothes I needed. She acted almost like a mother to me, you know.
Yeah.
And she was till the day she died. She always, asked how I was doing and if I needed any help. And she suggested that to find out what career I would go into, that I should go to this psychologist, I don't know if you want to call him that, who gave ink blot tests, which is called the divorce art test. Mm. So I went to them, and he gave me a whole bunch of pictures of ink blots. And I was supposed to describe what I saw in those. So one of the things I picked out mostly was musical instruments. Then he said, well, that's natural in everybody. But he said, you would be good in the arts. So I said, like what? He said, well, drawing or silkscreen printing. So by golly, I became a silkscreen printer through Mrs. Derry.
Wow. A Rorschach test. That's...
Yeah.
Wow.
That's what you call ships that pass in the night, you know?
No.
You know, when something happens to you, and later on you say, I wonder why that happened to me. You don't say it was fate, it was ships that pass in the night.
Yeah.
That you either get on or you get off of.
So you mentioned that Mrs. Derry, right? She helped out a bit. This was after your mother had passed,
yeah.
Right? Do you feel that because it was just your father and you by this time, because your siblings were
at first,
older.
And then my sister was in the Army nurse, and she got a hardship discharge.
Yeah. So you
came home, and she became a nurse at the VA hospital. Mm. And she was a nurse for 34 years before she died. Okay. But she took care of my dad from 1945 to 1985. 40 years she took care of him.
So do you feel like your community as well, in addition to other members of your family?
Listen, the community of Greenhills, I can name chapter and verse of people that helped me. There was Hapar, he was police chief. There's Mr. Newkirk, he was assistant police chief. There's Chief Fishback, who lives on Chalmers Court right up the street from me. And Midge Willis, who ran the Greenhills Credit Union. Dick Bates, who was public services director. And one thing he did, just briefly, he was responsible for that World War II monument there that still stands on the green. And at the time during the war, he said I'd make it out of marble or sandstone or something like that. He said, well, let's make it out of concrete. Nickel never hold up. And by golly, some way they cast that monument in concrete. And it still stands today, 60, 70 years later. And on it, there's Jack Malloy. He was the first man killed in Greenhills. Jack Malloy, BFW, put his name after. I think there was 4 or 5 other names, which in my story about that patriotic Greenhills, it's in that book. The names of those people are in there. And there was Mr. Knapp, who ran the Greenhills frozen food lockers. In those days, nobody had freezers. So at the lower level of Greenhills, Mr. Knapp had a butcher shop and frozen food lockers. Actual, you could rent them out. And all the farmers would bring their beef and stuff in to be dressed and cut up and stuff like that. And he sold meat, and then he had. My mother would used to say, "Give me a quarter." She'd go up to Knapp's and ask Mr. Knapp to give you a leg bone for the dog. Give him a quarter. So she said, "Tell him to leave some meat on it." So I marked up to the Greenhills food locker, go in there and said, "Mr. Knapp, my mother says to give me a bone for our dog for a quarter and leave some meat on it." And after a while, old Mr. Knapp knew what the situation was. So I'd take that bone home, and Mother would crack it open and make matzo balls soup, and then she would make soup out of that bone and put vegetables and stuff in that. And that's how we got by during the war, you know.
Yeah.
But Mr. Knapp, I think, gave away more food down there than he actually sold to people that needed it. A lot of people don't know that. In those days, the village hall was down on that lower level. The jail was under the fire station, the police station. That was on the lower level. And that was about it. Heyday bowling lanes came in later on. And there was Mr. Hayes who ran the Shell station. He was a good friend of the family. And when we got married, Sal and I, we rented the American Legion Hall. And we got 2.5 barrels of beer and a bartender for $100 and the hall rental. That's where we had our wedding reception.
We're at about 30 minutes. Do you want to take a break for a quick
No, I'm fine.
You're good? Okay.
Okay. Wonderful. How's
We're about halfway.
I got my annual here if you want. It was my pictures of my classmates, a lot of other information.
maybe at the end?
Yeah.
Maybe at the end we'll pull it up.
Okay, but anyhow, that's my picture in it. And there's a story about my picture. We all went up to a long place, it's Columbus, Ohio, by bus to have our senior pictures taken for the annual. And I had this acne so bad that I had to pay an extra $10 to have him take the blemishes off of my negative. So what you see in that picture, it doesn't show how bad my acne was. And I never forget my Aunt Margaret, when I was a teenager, paid for my dermatology. She sent me to Dr. Kendall downtown, who was a leading dermatologist at the time. And they gave me x-ray treatments those days for acne. And by God, it cleared it up. But you know, one of the big things I wanted to talk about at school was the gymnasium and the auditorium also, because the seats folded down from the wall. Mm-hmm. And on the south side, they had doors that would open up in the summertime because they didn't have air conditioning. And when Our Lady of the Rosary Church first started, we had our services there in the auditorium. And again, Mrs. Schumacher, who had lived in the same apartment we lived, was the organist at our church. She found out that I sang tenor, and I sang in that choir, in the church choir, for quite a while. Then they finally built the church they have now, and the school. They built the school first. They built a basement, and they made the church in the basement, and And then they built the school on top. So we had mass in the basement until we could get enough money to build the regular church. So we were charter members of that church also. And Sally and I now are charter members of the St. Matthias. We started that church. Anyhow, our faith has had a lot to do with who we are. You know, my mother always taught us kids to keep the faith. Whatever your faith is, she said, I don't care if you're Protestant or Catholic, Episcopalian, whatever. Always keep the faith. And that's what I've basically lived my life on. And I try to teach that to my kids. You know, which is very important, I think, in an upbringing of a child.
Do you think religion played an important role in many members of the community of Greenhills, in their lives as well?
Oh, I think so, yeah, because amazingly, the Protestant churches and the Early Rosary Church got along fine.
Really?
We'd have every year we'd have a festival or lawn favor, whatever they call it, to raise money. And then also, down below in the lower level, they had that market area with a, I don't know if it's still there or not, but they had like awnings on it. They had truck gardens come in there. They used to have their carnivals there. American Legion would have them, the VFW, and they bring in Ferris wheels and all kinds of stuff. Now, before we ever had Disneyland, we had the carnivals. Then the Our Church had their thing right on the green area. But the big thing back then was the American Legion Post annual 4th of July fireworks display. They did that for years. And people would come from miles around just to see the fireworks in Greenhills. And they'd have I remember they always had the fire trucks, volunteer fire trucks, you know. But I've been on, when I worked at the post office, I worked at night. And a couple of times I'd come home at night and I'd see the fire trucks go out and I'd follow wherever they went because it was all volunteer. And one time they had a big fire over in New Burlington and some of the guys didn't show up. So the fire chief said, hey, Haverland, come in there and help hold this hose for me. So I went into this burning building over in New Burlington. I don't know what it was, some kind of garage or something. And I helped put out the fire. Another time, the old mill there on the west fork of the Mill Creek, there at Mill and Miles Road, the building, I think, part of it's still standing. It burnt one year. And I came upon that, and I helped them with that. Those days there wasn't any fire plugs around, so they had to pump the water out of the creek. So I think I helped them hold the hose in the creek or something. But I didn't even belong to the fire department.
Yeah, about how old were you when this happened?
Well, you know, I was in my 20s, I guess.
You were just there to help out. That's
well,
really cool.
You know, one of the major persons, there was Nick Bates, he was also a fire chief. Hap Otting was the neatest police chief you ever want to meet. Chief Newkirk took down after him, and the first police chief we had was Chief Fishback. And he lived in Chalmers Court, right off the Chalmers Lane. And they ran that police department pretty well. In fact, when we would go swimming, we skinny dip in the pool, in the Greenhills pool. That was another thing.
What? You have to tell me more about that.
Well, anyhow, that was every year. The pool's still there, by the way.
Yeah, I've seen it. It's a great pool.
The Greenhills government, you get a whole family pass, I think, for about $10 for the whole family. So in the summertime, us boys and teenage kids live in that pool, you know. And one summer, I got a job checking baskets, and when I went to retire to get my Social Security, by golly, that, I don't know, 3 or 4 months I worked there checking baskets, counted towards my Social Security retirement. But we used to go there, and of course, in those days, there was always we'd spend all day there, you know. Except to go home maybe get something to eat. But I didn't hardly know how to swim at all when I first went there. I could paddle swim. But then I got to be a great diver and good swimmer, just learning from observing. But all the girls would come there and do their sunbathing, you know, and us teenage boys would sit there and ogle them. At one time, this is kind of funny. It's kind of sad, but it's kind of funny. This one girl, I'm not going to mention her name. She got up on the high board and started bouncing up and down. So of course all those guys were watching us. And she dove in the water, and I was sitting on the edge of the pool. And she came up to the ladder, you know, where I was sitting next to. And she slapped my face. I said, "What was that for?" She says, "That's for what you were thinking when I was up there." And I thought, what the heck's going on here? I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, and so I'm still stuck on you all skinny dipped at the pool, though. I assume this was something that you snuck in. And
late at night, you know, after the pool closed. Some of our gang, you know, guys would get together.
Mm-hmm.
We sneaked down the pool. And right behind the pool was Malloy's, which is, I don't know if it's still there or not, but it's like a nightclub. Mm-hmm. Or a country club or something. Mm-hmm. But there was a hedge, a sidewalk on the back side of the pool. So we'd go take our clothes off all the way and ditch our clothes under the hedge, climb over the fence, and we go into the pool and start swimming. Well, that was all well and good until some of the guys that are braver got up on the board, and they would dog the board. Now, I don't know if you know what that is, but they jump up and down on the board. Okay. And you go, then they dive in. Well, that noise would echo all the way up to the police station. So then I hop out of it, and one of his policemen would come down with the police car, and they drive down close to, they couldn't get right up to the fence. And they would take their spotlights and they would shine it all on the pool. We'd hide on the north, the west side of the pool, right underneath the ledge. And sometimes they would get out of their car and open the gate, and we would swim across the pool, jump over the fence, grab our clothes and run up behind the high school, put our clothes on and scamper on home. Well, one day, I go to hop over the hedge to get my clothes, and my feet caught the top of the hedge, and I landed on the cement sidewalk on my knees and scraped them real bad, you know, I mean really bad. And I was bleeding like you wouldn't believe. And we all got behind the high school, and I put my shorts on and stuff. And what are we going to do? You got to have a good story. So the guys at the fire department, every night they would play cards and drink beer and all that. And then right next door was Hap Olling's police chief office, you know. So I went up to the fire department. I said, "Could you guys bandage my knees?" "Well, how'd you do that, Tom?" I said, "Well, we were playing hide and go seek, and I fell down and scraped my knees." They bandaged my knees, and Hap Ollie came out. He said, "You look pretty good in clothing."
So they were on to you.
Yeah. Yeah, he was a great old guy.
Mm.
But he was a good friend of my dad's. One time, Don Leonard, that's another story I have to tell you. He was my best friend when I was growing up, mainly because he had a driver's license and drove his dad, 1939 Plymouth. And he played drums. The Billy Petering Dance Band, which was a high school dance band there at Greenhills. Well, Don says to me, he says, "Tom," he says, "I hear they're going to have a fox roundup." I said, "A fox roundup? What's that?" He said, "Well, it's something that the farmers have. And the farms around Greenhills, they all form a circle. And they beat drums and stuff, and they come in. And when they chase all the foxes to the center, and then they kill them." I said, "You got to be kidding me." He said, "Yeah, you got to have a shotgun." I said, "Well, I got Dad's shotgun. I still have it down in the basement." I said, "I don't know, Don." I said, I don't think I... Oh, I said, "Go ahead, sneak it out of the house." So that's when we lived on the third Chalmers. We had a back door that went to the kitchen and went out into the backyard. So I went into the utility closet and got Dad's shotgun and a couple of shells. I snuck out there. Don lived on Burley Circle. I ran over to his house. He got in his car and went up to the fire department. And he walked in the fire department. I had a shotgun in over my arm like Daniel Boone. And the boys, the fire department boys said, "What are you guys doing here?" "Oh, we're here for the fox roundup." And with that, Hap Ollie, his office is right next door. He hears that. He comes out. He says, "Fox roundup." He says, "Hell, boys, they haven't done that in years. That was 20 years ago." He said, "What are you doing with that shotgun, Haverland?" He said, "Give me that shotgun." So he confiscated my shotgun. So Hap called my dad. Said, "Gus," he said, "I got your son in jail here."
I was going to ask how you knew where the jail was.
And Dad said, "What did he do?" He said, "Well, he got your shotgun." Oh my God. Dad came over, as big as I was. He gave me a couple of swats on behind. He said, "Get the hell home," he said. And Hap gave him back his shotgun. But that was the story of the Greenhills Roundup.
So in a community so tight-knit, you couldn't get away with much.
No, no. But another time, Don, God rest his soul, that's another story. We used to go over to the Playland Bar on Reading Road. It was a piano bar. Really neat place. It was there for years. It was a proper little night spot where single guys and gals would meet, you know. And they had a piano player right in the center of the bar. Well, we used to go over there quite often. Well, Don, at the time, decided he wanted to collect guns. So he goes to a friend of his whose father was I think a major in the Ohio State State Guard. What do you call that?
Would it just be like the Ohio National Guard?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah.
So he buys his pistol off of this father of this guy. So we decided we were going to go over to, first we wanted to go to the Skyline Tavern at Lunken Airport. There was another place they had disc jockeys and stuff. So we go over there, and I told Don before, I said, Don, put that pistol in the glove compartment, because we all dressed up in zoot suits and stuff. So he said, oh, I will, Tom. Well, sure enough, we go into that Skyline bar there at Lunken Airport. And Don takes that gun and it starts to slip out of his pocket, and he repositioned it. And somebody saw him. They heard that we were talking about going up to the Playland bar. So we go up to the Playland bar, and we always like to sit right around on the far end of the horseshoe bar. And it was right up next to the amplifying stuff with knobs on it and stuff. And Don got up to go to the John, and he brought that gun in with him. And as he got up, it hooked on the knobs of one of those radio amplifiers and started to pull out. He pulls the gun out and sticks it back in his pocket. And we were getting ready to go, and as we were going out the door, Don opened the door to get out of the bar, and there's two guys there with 45 pistols and arrest him. And they take him around the side of the building, they're slapping him. Where's the long gun? Where's the long gun? I don't know what you're talking about. Oh, Don tells them how he got the gun and all that. So they take us down to the Reading police station, put us in jail, and the guy says, you got one phone call, you can call whoever you want to. And because Hap Arden was such a good friend of my dad, I thought, I'll call Hap Arden, the police chief. So I called Hap and I said, Hap, I said, I'm in jail, and I told him the story. He said, let me talk to that police chief. So he talked to the police chief, and by golly, let us go. But that's the one kind of guy he was. He always, he knew that you weren't a bad guy. He knew the circumstances some dumb teenage kid pulled, But Don went on during the Korean War. He went to Europe, and he met a French girl from Algiers and got married. And he learned the French, and he was an interpreter for I think it was the 4th Army Division he was in. Anyhow, they got married and had one little boy named Adrian. He said they named him after the picture of Adrian Gray. Did you ever see that movie?
Oh, yeah.
Well, they named their son Adrian. And they came back to the States to meet the family, and the little boy didn't speak nothing but French.
No.
A little bit of English. That was his mother, taught him French, of course.
Mm.
But anyhow, Don went back to Europe, and he was on the German Autobahn, and he got an automobile wreck and got killed. So Don played drums all those years, and I used to go to the drum dates with Billy Peter's band I was like a grip, you know, I helped set up the stands and stuff like that. But one thing is very interesting, talking about famous persons you meet. Rosemary and Betty Clooney lived in Greenhills for quite a while because their parents were having marital problems.
Mm.
So they went to live with their uncle in Greenhills and aunt. Well, Billy Peterson found out that they could sing pretty good. So he hires them to sing in his band. So who else to take these gals to all the band dates in high school and stuff like that? John had this 39 Plymouth sedan, four-door. So he had his drums in the back seat and in the trunk, and we'd go pick up the Clooney sisters. They would sit in the back seat, Don and I would sit in the front seat. And I don't know how many dates we went like that, but of course, Rosemary always looked out for her sister Betty, like a hawk. And I was fond to say I never did make it to the back seat.
We actually have to switch batteries.
Okay, so why don't we take a short break?
Okay.
It's a good place to end for a little bit. Yeah.
Stop.